Madden NFL 17 tries to bring a few new things to the table while largely keeping the game familiar to last year's iteration. Some of these new things hit, some of them miss, and some of them fall somewhere in between. On the gameplay front, Madden 17 applies two fundamental elements to core gameplay. The first is gap play. For those who aren't up to speed, gaps are created on the line of scrimmage when defenders and blockers engage. These gaps are named by letters and are often strategically made so that defenders on the second level can cover or blitz a hole when needed. Apparently, this was never in Madden, and now it is. While you probably won't even notice it unless you get into Skills Trainer and see how it actually affects plays, it does work. If you do your job and cover your gap assignment playing a D lineman or a linebacker, more than not you'll have success on the play. Ignore your gap assignment and you could be exposing your defense to a big run right up the gut. The other fundamental gameplay addition is better zone coverage. Different types of individual zone coverages have been implemented that defines just how each man should play their zone. This results in defenders acting more capable when it comes to who comes into their zone and just how far they can play their zone. Because of this, the passing game becomes a bit more challenging, making really reading the defense pre-snap important. Not that you can't have success if you don't read the defense, but you're going to be in much better shape if you know what you're looking for. The passing game is solid, but it's still plagued by a lot of the old problems Madden has had for a long time. Throwing off your back foot rarely sees any sort of consequence. The AI of the QBs is just plain poor, and from launch day until the first post-launch patch was released, I was experiencing a bug where the CPU-controlled quarterbacks never scrambled in franchise mode. They would just drop back, bounce up and down, and either throw the ball away or drop back even further before getting sacked. And speaking of throwing the ball away, there doesn't seem to be any intentional grounding penalties being called for QBs throwing the ball away inside of the tackle box, allowing for QBs to really get away with stuff they really wouldn't be able to in real life. The run game feels a tad more enjoyable to play this year, and that's due in part to the new ball carrier moves, which seems like something that's promoted every year, but it really does pop this year. Now by holding the precision modifier button, you can pull off new spin moves, stiff arms, trucking, and hurdles to evade defenders. Tiburon has done a much better job of making weight and height feel important, and there's a big fumble risk attached to attempting these newly animated maneuvers. Running with a power back hasn't really been much fun since the days of the truck stick in older Maddens, and it's still not on that level, but it's definitely better than it has been. These new animations often suck defenders into situations they can't get out of, which takes away a bit of user control. But honestly, I don't mind. It keeps the game from being too easy, and elite runners really feel elite. Players have certain traits to pull these moves off, so not every Tom, Dick, and Harry will be breaking your ankles out there. Special teams got a lot of focus this year, and it's mostly for the better. First off, there's a new kick meter. And by new, I mean that they went back to the old golf swing meter, where you have to click X or A 3 times to set your power and accuracy. I like this way much better, as it does give slightly more challenge to a system that we could all do with our eyes closed previously. If you're not paying enough attention, it's possible to miss extra points, and the new meter certainly amps things up in online play, since there's usually a bit of lag to every game. There's also now a mechanism for blocking kicks. Much like playing a D lineman, you'll have to hit the right trigger in time with the snap to get a good jump off the ball. Then, once you time the snap perfectly, you control the defender and have to time the dive so that you get the right angle and you're not running into the kicker. I love the risk-reward of this mechanic because if you jump too early, you might be giving your opponent a first down and an opportunity at more points or an easier kick. I usually only attempted the block if my opponent had more than 5 yards to go for a first down. As far as frequency, I was only able to block 3 or 4 kicks in my whole time. That's outside of Skills Trainer, of course, because it's really easy to block a kick inside of Skills Trainer. Either way, this was a much needed mechanic. Now it feels like you're never really out of the woods when kicking a last-second field goal. You're supposedly able to ice the kicker at times, but this never popped up for me. Ever. There seemed to be something wrong with punting, where occasionally a punt would only travel about 10 yards, which would cause all sorts of chaos. Receivers seemed to drop a lot more passes than last year, but I rarely felt like a drop happened that just shouldn't have. Human error is a part of real football, and it's great that it's represented in the game. Because of the new ball physics, passes thrown in traffic are rarely ever caught, so you'll have to think twice about who's in front of your receiver. Presentation received quite a bit of attention this year, and it's all led by the new commentary team of Brandon Godden and Charles Davis. There was a lot of hype going into this new commentary, and I'm sad to say that a lot of it was overhype. Do not get me wrong here, the commentary is indeed better than it possibly ever has been in Madden, but it's still quite a few rungs down from almost every other sports game available. The good about the commentary is that it's more contextual, and that there seems to be more there. If you were to just hear one game of commentary, you'd think a lot of good things. However, if you play as many games as I do inside of franchise mode, you'll see that there's a lot of the same issues that were there before. Lines are repeated with almost the same frequency as last year, especially when it comes to talking about specific players. I had to hear about how Colin Kaepernick was a former baseball player every single game. A lot of the time, commentary from Charles Davis, who I'm a big fan of in real life, just runs too long. Frequently, the commentary will fall silent short of the next play, leaving a lot of dead air. Rarely will it ever fall perfectly in the middle. Brandon Godden, who isn't a bad commentator at all, has a distinct trail off that gets on your nerves after a while. The excitement doesn't flow naturally for the most part, either leaving big plays being met with silence or a lack of enthusiasm in general. Where commentary does hit is in franchise mode, when the guys are talking about season stats, records, transactions, personal bests, playoffs, and more. Although even this was far less than I expected. I had to hear Brandon Godden call every rookie quarterback that I played with or played against a veteran, and how they've been in the league for so long. Then, when my QB was actually a veteran, Godden began calling him a rookie. There are weekly commentary updates, which, as far as I can tell, only affect the commentary in Play Now, Ultimate Team, and Draft Champions, and talks about real-world NFL happenings. Franchise doesn't seem to benefit from this at the moment, but may in the future. Since I only play franchise mode, for me personally, this is a novelty that doesn't interest me at all. Some of you may get a kick out of hearing the Madden announcers talking about stuff that just happened though. Madden 17 decides to stick with the augmented stat banners it introduced last year, and I'm still mixed about these. I lean more on the side of not caring for them because 1, they're too small and sometimes the system can't fit all the stuff it needs to fit on them. 2, the players' bodies can go through the banners, making them sometimes impossible to read. And 3, they often only stay up for a second, not nearly enough time for me to even know what the heck it's talking about. There are more stat displays for first versus second half performances, and even showing your team's entire draft class from that year. There are new intros that fall in line with the broadcast/surreal hybrid that Tiburon seems to aim for. You'll see your starting lineups posed before the game, and I'm not a huge fan of this. It's just weird, because players wouldn't really do this in real life, and all the players do the same poses. There's no variance that I've seen. So your tight end will always be flexing, and your safety will always be shooting an arrow. Replays have been redone and now capture the action with much higher accuracy. And a pylon cam has been introduced, which looks fantastic when it works properly, but for the most part it'll just show someone's feet as they run across the goal line. There's now a new mechanic for skipping presentation cutscenes by holding down the X or A button for a set amount of time. I'm a big fan of this addition, as I usually like to watch these cutscenes play out, but sometimes mistakenly button through them. The overall presentation is definitely an improvement from the previous few years, but it still has a mountain to climb, especially when NBA 2K just instituted an 11-person dynamic commentary system. I'm not going to say much about Ultimate Team and Draft Champions because it's not really my thing. I did play online a handful of times, and Ultimate Team seemed to be quite similar to last year, but I know there are some differences in there, such as team chemistry and whatnot. What I will say about online play is that most of my experiences were pretty pleasant in terms of responsiveness. There was hardly any lag for the most part, though multiple opponents were kicked for excessive griefing when they just stopped calling plays. I don't really know why or what that was all about, but it happened about 3 times. The menu systems are pretty much the same as last year. They look and function the same, and I hate them, though I notice I'm getting more used to them. I complained about them a lot in my Madden 16 review, so I won't say much about them here, since the same problem still exists with them being confusing and obnoxious. And now we can dive into my main focus of any sports game, franchise mode. After we were told by Madden 17 creative director Rex Dixon that franchise mode will be receiving an overhaul this year, well, it didn't. I guess everyone's definitions are different, but yeah, no. This was no overhaul. In fact, if I were to put the two menus together side by side, it would be quite difficult for most to even tell what the differences are. That's not to say that Madden 17 didn't add and improve to the mode. Probably my favorite new addition is the practice squad option. We can now store up to 10 players who have 2 or fewer years of service in the NFL on our practice squads. This allows you a chance to keep guys who are on the bubble during the preseason, and if you have an injury or a spot to fill on your team, you can first look to your practice squad for a replacement. Be careful of who you put on your practice squad though, as any team can snatch away your practice squad players so long as they sign them to their active rosters. And you can do the same to any other team. It's not completely realistic as there's no waiver wire system like in real life, but it works well implemented the way it is here. Game planning now has a bit more to it. As I described earlier, you now have much more of a feeling of actual game planning due to the focus of what your upcoming opponent likes to run and what you'll need to practice to stop it. You can earn medals and drills that are specific to whatever scheme your opponent likes to run, and once you get the medal you're satisfied with, you can then sim that drill from there on out. You'll also get a boost in-game pertaining to the scheme. Tiburon has also added cutscenes to the beginning and ending of practices, which is a nice touch, but it also gets repetitive. By my second season, I just resigned to simming through game planning and moving forward. It became such an insignificant part of my week-to-week to-do list that I honestly spent more time looking through the news feed than I did prepping for the upcoming game. Now, you can play every practice and just take whatever medal you get, which is what I was doing to be more immersive, but after a while, once you get going through the same drills every single time, you just want to skip past it because it's not dynamic enough. Nothing really changes from practice to practice. You can change who you want to get special XP payouts by selecting 3 focus players. Based on their developmental trait, each focus player will get either 100, 200, 300, or 400 XP. I suppose there's plenty of XP stuff to worry about, but I just don't care for XP. The newsfeed now has a different look, but it's much the same stuff. I do like the newer layout compared to the older one, as I can browse the news more quickly. However, I can't say that it's necessarily good. There's a lot of this team is playing that team this week, and Coach X hopes to get his offense going. Really lazy stuff that doesn't do anything for me. There are other things that have gotten small tweaks in tuning, but this is largely what you experienced last year. I will say it is better, but only slightly. I think franchise heads deserve way better than this, especially after being teased by marketing that this was going to be a significant change. We found out later in the pre-release hype that the big new change to franchise mode was play the moments. To me, play the moments does the opposite of what franchise mode should really do, which is immerse me. I felt a huge disconnect to my team and each game that I used play the moments for. Much like similar features that sped up a game in other sports titles, play the moments loses a lot in the way of context to each game. You're able to see the result of each play, you're able to choose your speed, but something just gets lost when you don't actually see the play happen. I saw a lot of 4-yard runs during simulations, which made me wonder if the sim engine was broken. If you speed the game down to the slowest option, you'll actually get a broadcast camera to watch the game play out, which is probably the way to go if you use play the moments. However, that's not going to make the game any much quicker, and play the moments seems like it was mainly built for people who only want to spend 20 to 30 minutes on each game instead of the usual hour. In fact, the game pushes play the moments so hard that it's the default option whenever you select the weekly game tab. This feature will probably be for you if you just like to play the GM of your team and don't actually like to play Madden, or you just really have no time to be playing franchise mode. But if you have no time to be playing franchise mode, you probably shouldn't be playing it. And for all these reasons, I'm really scratching my head about play the moments and why it was such a huge focus. It's a spruced up super sim that I personally don't care for, but your mileage may vary and there's nothing wrong with that. There's also now an in-game ticker, which is nice, but it's like, come on, a ticker? We had to wait this long for a ticker? Football games back in the 16-bit days had tickers. If it were a system like NCAA Football 14 had, where they actually do a studio break and focus on certain games throughout the game that you were playing, then I would be pretty impressed. But it's not. It's just a ticker. It's good to have, but it's not very impressive. It's quite clear that the CPU roster management AI is still underwhelming. For example, the Saints and Drew Brees couldn't agree to a new contract during the regular season, and the Saints were hurting for a QB to start the offseason. I was playing as the 49ers, and I was able to trade Colin Kaepernick, $100 million contract in all, to New Orleans for a second-round pick. The following week, the Saints signed Brees in free agency. There's no memory, no relationship system, and very little to keep the CPU from making dumb roster moves. What's worse is that it really doesn't make itself fully apparent until you're a few years deep into your franchise. There's also now formation subs, allowing you to substitute different players in and out for specific plays. I don't use formation subs much, but it is a good option to have for sure. I know it may seem like I'm harping on this area of the game, but if gameplay is the meat, then franchise mode is my potatoes. If they took franchise mode out next year, for example, I wouldn't have any reason to play the game. The steak, which is the gameplay in this case, tastes pretty darn good, even if there's a lot of fat left on. The potatoes, however, which is franchise mode in this case, taste like they rolled under the stove and were left there for a few years before being served. What's missing from franchise mode is authenticity, dynamic events that really shake up your playthrough, and the human element of football. To be quite frank, it's just plain boring. I was able to get more than I usually get out of franchise mode this year, but it still falls well short of where I think it should be. All in all, I can have fun with Madden 17, and the constant updates and patches make Madden 17 one of the most well-supported games you can find outside of PC. However, I grow more and more frustrated every year because it always feels like EA and Tiburon are afraid to make that big jump into truly amazing territory with this game. It's never a great idea to compare two games to each other for a review because you don't want to give off the wrong idea about a game. However, when comparing this to NBA 2K, a game in the same broad genre of sports, they're on different planets. I truly hope that one day Madden could be on the same level of depth and attention as the NBA 2K series, because that's the day that I think the Madden series will earn the praise and respect that it seeks every year. I give Madden NFL 17 3 stars out of 5.